Practically since the beginning of this Krishna conscious movement in the West, young people who have wanted to join our ashram have been vehemently opposed by their parents. In many cases, not all. This is nothing new. It's been going on since practically time immemorial, that a young boy usually wants to follow the path of renunciation and take fully to spiritual life, and the parents are opposed. Srila Prabhupada writes in his purport to Sri Caitanya-caritamrta, Antya Leela, chapter 13, text 113. Everyone naturally gets a father and mother at the time of birth. But the real father and mother are those who can release their offspring from the clutches of imminent death. This is possible only for parents advanced in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, any parents who cannot enlighten their offspring in Krishna consciousness cannot be accepted as a real father and mother. So we see among non-devotee parents, if their son or daughter drinks and smokes and has illicit connections with the opposite sex, the family members think nothing of it. In the Western countries. In India, increasingly, they don't care either. In the West, especially, the parents might be disturbed and think there's something wrong with their children if they're not having boyfriends and girlfriends and taking drugs and so on and so on. But if someone leaves all this behind to take to Krishna consciousness, they say that he or she has become a disgrace to the family. They become very disturbed. What about children born to devotee parents? According to the transcendental science, we understand that they were probably themselves devotees in a previous life. You get born in a family of devotees because you were practicing devotion in the previous life. Being born to devotees means they have, at least theoretically, the best possible opportunity for being trained in Krishna consciousness from birth. But they can also reflect that if you're born in a family of devotees, it means, okay, you were probably a devotee in a previous life, but you didn't go back to Godhead due to material attachments. And it is the duty of parents to guide their children, to train their children in such a way that having taken birth from them, their children will no longer take birth again. Srila Prabhupada often quoted, he quotes it right in the preface to his Bhagavatam, the words of Prahlad Maharaj, a famous child devotee who resisted his father's anti-Krishna consciousness. So the verse that Srila Prabhupada quoted in the preface to his Bhagavatam opus, Kaumara acharet pragyo dharman bhagavataniha durlabhang manushang janma tadapya dhruvam artadam. The purport of which is that from the very beginning of life, children should be trained in Krishna consciousness, because this human life is very rarely attained, and it can give us the highest benefit. But it's uncertain. We'll all have to die. It might come sooner than expected. In Sri Caitanya-caritamrta, Madhya Leela, chapter 3, text 181, purport, when Srila Prabhupada is commenting on Shachi Devi's distress at her Nimai having taken sannyas, at the same time giving him permission and encouragement to do so, Srila Prabhupada writes, "It is a great happiness for a mother if her son does not leave home to search out Krishna, but remains with her. At the same time, if a son does not search after Krishna, but simply remains at home, he is certainly blamed by experienced saintly persons. Such blame certainly causes great unhappiness for a mother. If a real mother wants her son to progress spiritually, she had better allow him to go out searching for Krishna. The mother naturally desires the welfare of the son. If a mother does not allow her son to search for Krishna, she is called Ma, which indicates Maya. By allowing her son to go as a sannyasi and search for Krishna, Sati Mata instructs all mothers of the world. She indicates that all sons should become real devotees of Krishna and should not stay at home under the care of an affectionate mother. This is supported by Srimad Bhagavatam. Famous quote from Rishabhdev. Gurur na sasyat swajano na sasyat, pita na sasyaj janani na sasyat, daivang na tatsyan na patischa sasyan, namo chayedya samupeta mrityum. No one should become a spiritual master, nor a relative, father, mother, worshipable deity, or husband if he cannot help a person escape the imminent path of death. Every living entity is wandering within the universe, subjected to the law of karma and transmigrating from one body to another and from one planet to another. Therefore, the whole Vedic process is meant to save the wandering living entities from the clutches of Maya, birth, death, disease, and old age. This means stopping the cycle of birth and death. This cycle can be stopped only if one worships Krishna, as the Lord says in the Bhagavad-gita, Janma karma chame divyam evang yo veti tatvataha tyaktva dehang punarjanma naiti mameti sorjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. To stop the cycle of birth and death, one has to understand Krishna as he is. Simply by knowing Krishna, one can stop the process of rebirth into this material world. By acting in Krishna consciousness, one can return to Godhead. The highest perfection of life is for a father, mother, spiritual master, husband, or any other family member to help others return home back to Godhead. That is the most preferred welfare activity for the benefit of relatives. Therefore, Sati Mata, although the mother of Nimai Pandit, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu considered all the facts and decided to allow her son to go out and search for Krishna. That's the end of the quote from that purport. Yeah, we often see that devotee parents are committed to Krishna consciousness, but at the same time have materialistic goals central to their own life. We often see that devotee parents, they're good devotees in many ways. They chant, they follow the principles, but they're very concerned with money, career, prestige, and so on. And they train their children like that to be devotees, but materially attached devotees, something like the demigods who are described as sakama bhaktas. And naturally, a child born in such a situation is likely to gravitate toward a mixed kind of devotional service. Their parents will, no doubt, instruct them or encourage them to chant the holy names, to follow the four principles, maybe in a somewhat compromised way. For instance, it's widespread in Vaishnava society today eating food full of sin, which means food, especially grains, not cooked by devotees, which is not offerable to Krishna. But we find many who are supposed to be initiated devotees who eat it without thinking twice about it. So that's an example of one kind of compromise, which is very common today. Children born in such families of good, pious devotees who are materialistic also, such children are likely to have taken birth from such parents because they themselves had mixed desires, which is why they were placed in such a situation. They were practicing Krishna consciousness in the previous life with mixed desires, and they got placed in this life in a family where they could continue with mixed desires. Thus, both the parents and the children are devotees, but materialistic at the same time. Janeya shuniya bisha kainu. Manusha janama paya Radha Krishna bhajiya janeya shuniya bisha kainu. Narottam Das laments that having attained this human form of life, I did not worship Radha Krishna, and therefore I have knowingly drunk poison. We may say, well, we worship Radha Krishna at home. But Narottam Das, who himself is, of course, a very topmost level of devotee, is lamenting that he did not do so fully. So he's making a prayer for us, which is not applicable to himself. I often see children of devotees, especially in the West, male children of devotees, especially in the West, as teenagers they often grow long hair. And I just think they were maybe hippies from the 1970s who have passed on and got born again, born in devotee families. They had some touch with Krishna consciousness, but they still have the hippie desire to have long hair like that. A few years ago in Chennai, I was giving a program in a public place. It was a smallish gathering, maybe a few hundred people, 300 or so. In India, that's nothing special. So there was a boy sitting, listening very intently. I was speaking just in English, with Vadagalai Tilak. That means Ramanuja Sampradaya, one branch of the Ramanuja Sampradaya, Vadagalai. So he was listening nicely. We chanted the Sanskrit verse. He chanted it very well. He clearly had practice in chanting Sanskrit verses. He was well trained. He was into the chanting. After the talk was over, he approached me and asked for blessings, which many people in India come and ask for blessings. And when they ask for blessings, I usually ask, well, what do you want blessings for? He said, I want to be a pure devotee, which is something he was a Vadagalai boy, but seems he was mixing up with ISKCON devotees, because this terminology, pure devotee. I said, well, I can give blessings on behalf of the Parampara for you to be a pure devotee, but you have to do your part also. What is your aim in life? What do you want to do with your life? And he told me, I want to be a big businessman. Very pious, very well trained in Krishna consciousness, wants to be a pure devotee, he says, but at the same time, when I ask him what he wants for as his aim in life, he says, I want to be a big businessman. So devotees growing up with mixed motives should consider that human life is meant for achieving the ultimate perfection. It's much better to live piously in mixed Krishna consciousness than to be forgetful of Krishna altogether. But human life is meant for doing whatever is required to get out of material existence. If we are to go back to Godhead in this life, we need to make a serious effort. Labdhva sudurlabhamidang bahusambhavante manusham artadam anityam apihadhiraha turnam yatetanapatedanu mrityu yavan nishriyasaya vishakalu sarvata syat. This human life is very rarely attained. Now we got it by good fortune. After many, many, many births, we should know it doesn't last very long, so we should very soberly consider that I have to act fast. We should immediately take up that which is required so that I don't get born again. And if we think, let me enjoy sense gratification, well, you can enjoy it in so many other lives. But only in human life do we have the opportunity to cultivate Krishna consciousness and go back to Godhead. So if you happen to be a child born in a situation where you have good, pious, devotee parents who are also materialistic, and you have the idea, I want to be a pure devotee, you actually want to be a pure devotee, then it's good to accept the good part of what the parents teach, chanting Hare Krishna, studying Srila Prabhupada's books. I hope they teach you that. But you also will have to reject that which is detrimental. You may have to break with the mentality that you had in a previous life, and who knows how many previous lives, and with the materialistic side of your parents. Like a swan who can separate milk from water. You have to see what's the good thing and what's the thing which we don't want. According to what principle? Anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam. Accept whatever is favorable for advancing in Krishna consciousness and reject that which is unfavorable. It's not going to be easy, and all of those involved in the conspiracy to brainwash the children into being fully Krishna conscious will be blamed. As Daksha blamed Narad Muni. If we tell young men, come, give your life to Krishna. We just read about Sachimata letting Nimai go to search out for Krishna. If we tell the young men, and the parents will say, what about his career? He can have a good career. That's what Daksha blamed Narad Muni for. We can read from the Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada's translation. Daksha blaming Narada Muni, telling him, alas, Narad Muni, you wear the dress of a saintly person, but you are not actually a saint. Indeed, although I am now in Grihastha life, I am a saintly person. By showing my sons the path of renunciation, you've done me an abominable injustice. You needlessly created a mentality of renunciation in innocent boys, and therefore you are shameless and devoid of compassion. All the devotees of the Lord, but you are very kind to the conditioned souls and are eager to benefit others. Although you wear the dress of a devotee, you create enmity with people who are not your enemies, or you break friendship and create enmity between friends. Are you not ashamed of posing as a devotee while performing these abominable actions? The same kind of criticism is going on today. Parents and others will criticize, pointing out how many young people who became full-time devotees later had to struggle and suffer in so many ways. And they'll point, you see, there are so many other senior devotees in ISKCON. They don't upset us by telling our children to dedicate their life to Krishna. Continuing Prajapati Daksha's tirade against Narad Muni. It's right there in the Bhagavatam. If you think that simply awakening the sense of renunciation will detach one from the material world, I must say that unless full knowledge is awakened, simply changing dresses, as you have done, cannot possibly bring detachment. Material enjoyment is indeed the cause of all unhappiness, but one cannot give it up unless one has personally experienced how much suffering it is. Therefore, one should be allowed to remain in so-called material enjoyment while simultaneously advancing in knowledge to experience the misery of this false material happiness. Then, without help from others, one will find material enjoyment detestable. This is an argument, it's a very strange roundabout argument, saying that, well, we accept that material happiness is miserable, and it leads to all distress. But anyway, we should enjoy it, and then we'll automatically become detached from it. This is really a case of jnaniya shunya bisha kaino. We know, but we're taking the poison, thinking that, yeah, let me take the poison, and then I'll understand that it's poison. Continuing from the Bhagavatam, Prajapati Daksha's tirade, those whose minds are changed by others do not become as renounced as those who have personal experience. And in the whole purport, Srila Prabhupada rebuts Daksha's position. Agreed. It is a risk joining an ashram. And those who encourage young men, generally young people, to join, have to see whether the candidate is actually fit. But myself, after carefully considering, we tend toward taking the risk, because if you risk giving everything to Krishna, but are not able to sustain doing so, that will still be for your tremendous benefit. Tyaktva swadharamang charanam bhujam hare bhajan apakvota patit tato yadi yatra kvava bhadram abhudamushakim kovarta apto bhajatang swadharamataha. If someone gives up his occupational duties and works in Krishna consciousness and then falls down on account of not completing his work, what loss is there on his part? And what can one gain if one performs his material activities perfectly? Srila Prabhupada comments on this in his Bhagavad-gita as it is commentary. He quotes this verse more than once therein. Please read it. Can't say everything in a short talk. And if you do, after taking the risk, make it all the way back to Godhead, that is the perfection of life, achieved after many, many births. On the other hand, if we don't make the endeavor to fully surrender, the likelihood is that our progress in Krishna consciousness will be very slow, and again we'll have to take birth. And we can go on and on and on, birth after birth like this, being pious and devotional, but not fully surrendering and not going back to Godhead. Of course, it is possible to fully surrender to Krishna in family life, and there are many exemplary and advanced devotees in Grihastha life, even today. Often the example is given of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. But realistically speaking, the huge majority of devotees are far from the standard of Srila Thakur Bhaktivinoda. It's not that simply by being a Grihastha devotee one is on the level of Srila Bhaktivinoda. Srila Prabhupada, in one of his purports, not very popular purport, not very often quoted, Srila Prabhupada writes, generally, a person cannot make much advancement in spiritual consciousness if he is married. He becomes attached to his family and is prone to sense gratification. Thus, his spiritual advancement is very slow or almost nil. We're especially here talking about devotee parents who are too materialistic and who in that way act partially as well-wishers of their children by instructing them in Krishna consciousness, but on the other hand act as their enemies by diligently training them to lead their lives in the mold of the materialistic society, to be materially ambitious, to be a material success. I am sometimes seen as the destroyer of my disciples' promising careers. Following Narad's example with the sons of Daksha, the Haryashvas and Shavalashvas, that's my duty, according to Srila Prabhupada, who writes in this section about Daksha and Narad. Desiring to train his sons to become grihastas fully equipped with knowledge, Daksha had sent them to execute austerities by Narayana Saras. Narad Muni, however, taking advantage of their highly elevated position in austerity, instructed them to become Vaishnavas in the renounced order. This is the duty of Narad Muni and his followers. They must show everyone the path of renouncing this material world and returning home back to Godhead. Although parents may be angry at us, we must perform our duty without hesitation because we are in the disciplic succession from Narada Muni. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had such a revolutionary policy. I recorded that in Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhava. The parents would come crying for their children. He would send them away. He said if we hadn't done this, there would have been no Gauriya Mat. Putting college boys on the wrong track is one thing, but I also yank established grihastas out of their comfortable situations, if I can. Maybe because I didn't have a good career, I am envious of others. I've heard myself I've been told that I've been described as a masochistic monk. And then about the children, we want to put them in Gurukul and train them from the beginning in Krishna consciousness without the kind of education by which they can have a good career. So the complaint is, well, what if they later want to have a normal life? Well, we are doing all we can to assure that they don't have a normal life. That's the whole point of Gurukul. We don't want them to be able to adjust to materialistic life. We want them to be able to adjust to Krishna consciousness. Now this is going to get strong objections from devotees, probably more than others, who often we see our devotees are more enthusiastic about material prospects than our average karmis. Srila Prabhupada said that new crows eat more stool. He said this with respect to Indians coming to the West. This was in the 1960s and 1970s, who are more enthusiastic than the Western people to enjoy sense gratification. So Srila Prabhupada said, new crows eat more stool. So it may be something like that devotees are many times seem to be more enthusiastic about the material prospects of themselves and their children than the average karmis are. How many grihasta devotees try to instill in their children the understanding that contemporary society is demoniac, absurd, misleading, disastrous? Very few. They don't believe it themselves. Srila Prabhupada referred to the polluted aim of life known as material enjoyment. Do you believe it? Do you believe? Do you take seriously? Pita na sasyat, janani na sasyat. Don't be a father, don't be a mother unless you can train your children on the path by which they won't have to take birth again. Devotees, non-devotees, they send their children off to school, to college, knowing that their characters are going to be spoiled. In India especially, we see that the parents are very interested that their children be toppers. They're in the top of the class. They become a material success. The fact that in college they're going to be subjected to pressure to take drugs, to have illicit sex. And many of them do fall into that. It doesn't seem to bother them. They're sending them into such a risky situation. Parents are training their children to be trophies to show off. You see, my child is a topper. My child has a big job in a multinational corporation in America. Some older woman, grandmother or whatever, with the girl was maybe 2 years old or 3 years old, and the grandmother says with a big smile on her face, she's going to be a doctor. The poor girl, she can hardly even walk or talk. She's going to be a doctor. It's already decided for her. Not she's going to be a pure devotee, she's going to be a chaste wife and good mother, no, she's going to be a doctor. So devotee grihastas are raising their children in a compromised way, and then they come and ask us for blessings that they become pure devotees. Contradictory? Or sometimes we see that grihasta devotees lament, oh, my son or daughter, he became a Muslim, or is eating meat. You throw them into the pit of snakes and expect them not to get poisoned. Now, you can encourage devotees to have good careers. You can do that. You do that. But just consider what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said about the father and uncle of Raghunath Das Goswami, who were highly respected, highly pious, devotees, but very materially attached. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Raghunath Das, your father and his elder brother are just like worms in stool in the ditch of material enjoyment. For the great disease of the poison of material enjoyment is what they consider happiness. Would you allow Raghunath Das to go and join Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Or would you want to keep him at home? Oh, he's just newly married. He's got a beautiful wife. He's the only son in the family. If you keep him at home, then you are what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu compared to worms in a stool pit. So many initiated Grihastha devotees not only don't want their children to be full-time devotees, full-time preachers, but they train them from the beginning, don't do that. You be at home and chant Hare Krishna. We see in our preaching in Vellore Institute of Technology, there are so many children there of devotee background, their parents are devotees, but they are the ones we hardly even bother trying to preach to them to be. How about giving your life fully to Krishna? They're already well indoctrinated to chant Hare Krishna, okay, but you're not going to join full time. We don't even bother trying with them. They're well inoculated against fully giving themselves to Krishna. In Srila Prabhupada's introduction to the Caitanya-caritamrta Adi Lila, he writes, if we wish to become fully Krishna conscious, we have to give up the shackles of Maya. Or, if we remain with Maya, we should live in such a way that we will not be subject to illusion, as did the many householders among Lord Chaitanya's closest devotees. So, it's not that we tell every young man to come and join us immediately against their parents' wishes. And accepted. In some, or maybe many cases, it may be better for the young men to not join, be married, everything. But following the way that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed Raghunath Das, we may also advise young men, just stay at home for now. When the time is right, come and join in full-time service. There's also the case of Raghunath Bhatta, whose parents were devotees. When Raghunath Bhatta visited Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Puri, he stayed for some time, Then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told him, go home to your parents, serve them in their old age because your parents are devotees, and after the parents pass away, come and join me, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said. He specifically told him not to marry. So there may be different cases. Whatever way, we have to consider how to give this life to Krishna, give ourselves fully to Krishna, and not be caught in the shackles of Maya yet again. I'll finish with another quote from Srila Prabhupada. If one puts into the bondage of karmic activity his disciple, son, or citizen, who is bereft of transcendental vision, how will one profit? It is like leading a blind man to a dark well and causing him to fall in.